What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, Tara LaFawn Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. What if the key to thriving in business and real estate wasn't just about strategy, but about reinvention, leadership, and leaving a legacy? Today's guest knows a thing or two about rising through the ranks and staying at the top. For nearly 3 decades, Sarah Michelle Bliss has been a powerful force in the real estate industry. From buyer's agent to team leader, best-selling author, and national speaker. She's helped shape the careers of agents across the country while championing the power of growth from the inside out. That's something I'm so passionate about too. As the director of agent development for RE/MAX professionals and a master coach with Workman Success Systems, Sarah teaches more than just real estate. She equips people to lead with confidence, purpose, and resilience. That is so important. Now, she's also the co-author of 8 Ways to Dominate Any Real Estate Market. But beyond the titles, beyond the accolades, Sarah is a woman on a mission to give back to the industry that has shaped her, one story, one strategy at a time. So buckle up as we explore what it means to build a confident, successful career while staying grounded in who you are. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here. So I've been excited. We talked months ago, and then all of a sudden here we are, and it's on the calendar. So I felt like it was so far in advance, and yet here we are. So I'm excited to be here. So thank you for finding me. I got an email from you, random. I'm like, yes, of course I want to come talk to you. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, you've got these books out. It became an international bestseller. You've really risen through the ranks. And I've worked with a lot of real estate professionals more on the personal branding side of things, how to grow your presence online, how to stand out from the crowd and from the rest. And it's not easy, right?
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so I would love to hear too a little bit about, you've got all this success, all these accolades right now, you've risen to the top, but was it always that way, Sarah?
No. The book actually, my business partner, Nate Martinez, and I were doing these little workshops in our community to help agents. And, a lot of the books you read are, they feel good, they got some ideas, but we really wanted to put something in industry that was tactical, like, hey, go do this. And that's why it's 8 steps, right? Is there's 8 practical things that you can go do. And we've been through every type of market. So he's close to 40 years. I'm close to 30. So you combine, marry those 2 numbers together. We got quite the experience in running the team. And when I started working for him, I had actually, my ex-husband's brother-in-law was working for a boutique real estate company. And I just needed a job, right? I was 18, right out of high school, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I started working at this boutique real estate company and rose really quickly. Within, a year, I was the broker's assistant, which basically means like I'm auditing files, writing checks, training agents, and don't have a license, right? Again, I'm an 18-year-old kid. So I stayed there for a few years and learned a lot of unfortunate things about real estate and decided to leave. And I had this license by now I'm licensed. And I had seen the RE/MAX signs and Nate signs everywhere. And he was the number 1 agent in the state at the time. And I called the brokerage. I'm like, hey, can I get a job being a transaction coordinator? They're like, no, we're not hiring, but Nate's always hiring. So I had an interview and I knew who he was. I'd gone up against him on a listing appointment and like, I was blown away at his marketing stuff. I'm like, I wouldn't hire me. I'd hire him because he was just this rock star agent. And I remember interviewing with him and he comes in and I was, we weren't poor, but we struggled. My ex-husband didn't make a ton of money. And so I had this red wool dress, which I'm in Arizona. wool is not practical. So
Right.
but it was red, and red's one of my power colors, right? And it had the big old shoulder pads and the big gold buttons, and it made me feel like I had my crap together, right? And I went into this interview, and he was late, and he comes in, and he's like, he looks me point blank, he goes, "Are you hungry?" And like in my head, I'm thinking, "You have no idea," because I knew I wanted to get divorced. I wasn't happy, and I had nothing. I literally had, and I'm dating myself, a $3,000 credit card from Citibank. That's it. That's all I had. Because he owned the house, he owned the car, everything. And I had interviewed with a commercial broker who really loved me and he wanted to pay me $50,000 a year. And at the time, that was like a lot of money, right? But something in my soul just really pulled me to this job where I would be 100% 1099 and I have to pay them to be there. Right. And so I joined the team and Nate gave me this book and said, go do everything. It was a 30 days book. I still have it, 30 days to success. Go do everything that's in this book. And I did. And I was just shy of rookie of the year my first year. And I outsold his top producing agent, but we have different accolades within our industry. And I was just shy of making rookie of the year my first year. So by like two transactions, it was silly. I should have got it. But I haven't looked back, and that was in a quote unquote normal market. But at that time, Phoenix was still kind of sleepy and, I think the average was like 65 days on the market to get your home sold. So that was a healthy market, right? And then, of course, we went through the boom and the crash, and then we did the REO market, which was wild. Those were wild times. So it hasn't always been easy, and now we're back to a more traditional market, but with inventory on the rise and interest rates, we're having to dust off some cobwebs coming out of a very strong seller's market and getting back into more of the tactical, how do you be a good realtor?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I would have made a really good realtor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I often think about that. I'm like, what if I would have done that, right?
Yeah.
I think I could definitely sell some homes for sure.
I
But
always I always thought I would be a good lawyer and but kind of am, right? Because the Constitution allows me to practice law. So kind of get in there and negotiate for people. So that was always my thing. I want to be a lawyer. So
I love that. So that's such an interesting so it seems like, this profession really kind of called to you at a really young age and you leaned into it. I love the fact too that you were gritty. You started off as a 1099, you basically had to pay to work.
yeah,
I was very similar as well. My first several jobs were 1099s and I loved it. It gave me a sense of ownership and responsibility, right? I think everybody should go through that at some point in time.
100%. No one's coming to save you when you're 1099.
No, they're sure not, right?
No one's coming to save you. You are it.
You are your own savior. So, you went through this, you found your now current business partner, you started to, really learn this market, rise through the ranks. Sounds like there's been a lot of challenges though, because the economy is kind of, all over the place. Of course, we know we had the 2008 crash. Then in 2021, 22, the market started going even crazier. So,
Well, back up that we opened our brokerage. Our very first business day was 9/11.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
no way.
Yeah, we had just opened our franchise up. We left the franchise we were at and opened a different one. And Nate and his business partner at the time, they had been in a early mastermind meeting, so they didn't even know what was going on. And us agents start trickling in for the first meeting, and we're teary eyed and just and they're like, "What's going on?" They had no idea what had happened, and it was a wild time. Opening. I mean, talk about like taking a risk and leaning into it when literally like we lost deals that day, people pulled out of transactions and it was wild. So but looking back at it, like I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they didn't let that situation define us in a different way, and here we are all these years later, standing strong. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I want to hear a little bit about your book, right?
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
when I talked to you all those months ago, I asked you, I said, my show's not about real estate professionals per se, but I do interview high performing leaders, leaders of industry, CEOs, that kind of stuff. And I asked you, could we take these steps and apply them to almost anything? And you said yes. So I want to hear a little bit about your book and these steps and just your general take on leadership and leaving a legacy.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think the book, many of the principles are can be applied. I mean, I don't care if you're selling pharmaceuticals, mortgage, widgets, doesn't matter, right? And even more so just in life. I mean, I think so many people just kind of bounce around. They don't have clarity. I had a coaching client of mine say that if you don't have clarity in the beginning, you have chaos in the end.
Ooh.
And, yeah, right. I know. I told him he needs to like get a TM on that. So, because it's true, right? And we look at so many people. They start out New Year's, they write New Year's resolutions, and then by like what, mid-February, they're done with them. And
Mid-February, it's like January 2nd, but yeah.
well, I was being optimistic, giving people a little bit of credit there. And actually, one of my good friends, he talks about looking at your life in 25-year increments. And so writing down just one line, like in 25 years, what do I want? And so our first chapter is defining your big why. We call it the blue dots. There's a whole funny story about the blue dot with Nate's, but because he went to the very first CRS conference. And, at the time he was a scrappy agent doing 25, 30 deals, selling, the auction properties and that kind of thing. And he goes to the convention and he sees all these people with a blue dot on their badge. And they tell him, they're like, these are the guys that are selling 100 homes a year or more, which, right, mind blows. And so he goes back to Phoenix, works, sells 100 homes, goes to the next CRS convention, and he's looking through his stuff. He's like, "Where's my blue dot?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" Well, they didn't do the blue dot that year. And so he was super disappointed. So we named the chapter the blue dot because it just is, it goes with the story. So, but what he did was he got clarity, right? And it was a Roger Bannister moment for him. And how many of us base our goals and our dreams and visions on what's been done in the past? Right? And you take somebody who dares to say, "Why not me?" And no one in Phoenix was selling 100 homes. And so he came back and was like, "I'm going to sell 100 homes," because he had that Roger Bannister moment. It was like, "Hey, I can go do this." Right? And so it's important for people to stretch and think like, "Why not me?" One of my favorite authors says that you have the audacity to ask that question, why not you? And so don't I would encourage people to think about like, okay, it's good to have a benchmark, right, of what we did in the past, but then cross through that and double it, because anything's capable if you have the right clarity, and the right commitment to it, and you're willing to get gritty and do the work and ask for help. Then opportunities show up. And I think so many times people get boxed in that they think, well, I don't have the money, or I don't have the resources, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this, fill in the blanks, right? And but the reality is if you just get really crystal clear about what it is that you want, resources will show up.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. You know, we have these vague and misty concepts of what we want, and we wonder why we don't get what we want. We don't even know what we want sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think that's so important with any goal, regardless of what your profession is, that we have super, super clear, defined goals and write these things down. Please write them down.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you get really clear, you start to see opportunities that you may have missed otherwise. And it's really true. I think of it as like, a horse with blinders on, right?
Yeah.
They can't see side to side. They can only see what's directly in front of them. And if you don't have the clarity, you have the blinders on. There could be an opportunity that passes right past you. And if you have those blinders on because you're not clear, you won't see it. And it doesn't mean that opportunity is not coming into your life, because honestly, I think opportunities come every second,
Yeah, I
right?
I agree. Yes. Yeah.
But that clarity really helps us actually see them. It's so powerful. It's such a simple concept, but it's so powerful, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't have to have some grand thing, right? It could just be something so simple. I was in Salt Lake last week, and we went and visited Tiny Tim's toy organization. If you ever find yourself in Salt Lake, go check it out. But it
I
was
was
one.
there 2 weeks ago.
Were
2
you really? Oh,
Yes.
how crazy is that? I was literally there, like, that's wild that you were there. Weren't you? I walked away from that so inspired that one man's vision has just had such a ripple effect across the world. And I've been sharing it in coaching calls since then. Like, hey guys, like, What's that tiny little idea that's inside of you that you're afraid to voice because you think it's silly or you think it's impossible or it's too big or it's too whatever? Like, what is that? And as your coach, I want you to share that with me because let's go do it. Let's go do it because I mean, 100% volunteer and donation, and they're making such a massive impact. Like, to me, like, that's the type of stuff I want to align with, and extracting that from people that I'm around, not even coaching clients. Like, I just want to inspire people in my life. Like, what's that tiny little idea that you have that could make a massive difference in the world?
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Welcome to my TED Talk, right? I love that. That's so true. So, we talked about clarity, getting really clear about your goals. What are some of those other steps that you have in that book that people could resonate with?
So in my profession, it's very easy to become one dimensional. And especially in an industry that you're rewarded for production, right? You're rewarded with plaques and awards and different things, right? And while that's all great, it can get very egocentric, and it can also create a one dimensional life. And so when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. People get into real estate thinking that it's going to be flexible. No, that's probably the biggest F word in real estate. Because when it's 6 o'clock and you need to be at a soccer game, but you got to go show a house, like, there's a choice there. And usually our child gets sacrificed. And so then one of the steps in the book, the second step, is identifying goals around the 8 areas of your life that are important. So that includes your family, your fitness, your religion, your community involvement, your relationships, your household relationships. And so it's really important that when we coach that and we talk about the book, is I don't want you to be one dimensional.
Yeah.
We can do amazing things because this job, we have, it's unlimited, the amount of income that you can make, as long as you're willing to put into work and have the conversations and do the right stuff, it's unlimited. And so, take that lid off of the pot and think about what are the possibilities. And if you can live life on your terms, what are you can provide better education for your children, you can provide better experiences for those you care about. Heck, you can have better food experiences, right? And then you can reach more people. And I believe that because I'm of service, I want to be able to go out there, and that service doesn't just mean I'm helping you with real estate. It transcends into other areas. Like, I've gone grocery shopping for an elderly woman who was shut in. She was one of my clients, right, during COVID. And so, look, those are things that we do that we don't talk enough about in our industry. But step two is making sure that your wheel of life is round and that it's not janky and lopsided on one side, right? And so that you set meaningful goals that affect the other areas. If you got children, there's no better accountability partners than children. Because if you tell them you're going to take them to Disneyland and then they see you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to, they will be correcting you. But it's important, right? Because when you're self-employed, and as you know, 1099, we make sacrifices to make the deals come together or make the paycheck. And the sacrifice is usually the people we care about. And then also our own selves. We sacrifice our own health, our self-care, all of that. And as women entrepreneurs, that's even more so, because we are the last. I mean, I'm not a mom, but I see the moms around me and their children are always like, that's their priority, right? And so they feed themselves last, they bathe themselves last. And then when you're an entrepreneur, that even your self-care gets even further down the line. And so it's really important in step two that you have meaningful goals that affect that, like I said, create that round, healthy, 3D life.
Yeah. Well, it's about aligning with your core values,
Hmm.
right? Because no amount of goals sacrificed for your core values is going to lead to a meaningful existence. It just won't.
Exactly.
And, no amount of money that we gain at the sacrifice of what we believe in is going to help us guide us to our purpose and fulfillment.
Hmm.
So I think that's really important too. And that goes back to clarity, like we were talking about. Again, it's not just about getting clear on your goals and objectives, it's about getting clear on what matters to you,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of times people not a lot of times, I see this often, is that we have goals that are not really our goals.
right. Absolutely. Oh
You
my
know,
God. We look
they're
on Instagram, right? And say, I want a Lamborghini and a house like that guy. And
right.
then,
Oh, well, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Absolutely. But what I mean is, oftentimes in my industry, people come into it as a second career and they have something still to prove to somebody that was significant in their former life, whether that was a parent, a coach, whatever, an ex, whatever. mine was my parent, right? Is proving my parent wrong. And so that was a huge battle, internal battle, right? And once I got to this quote unquote number that I thought would make that all go away, it didn't. It didn't. It was just a number, and so that I had to do that work on in my insides to say, I don't need to prove anything to anybody but myself. And so making sure, because a lot of times, like, I think people get into this and they're like, and I don't think people are even conscious of it. I wasn't at the time. It wasn't until I started really digging into things and going to therapy and working on myself, right? To understand that, hey, this voice in the back of your head this isn't really your driving force. You're doing this to prove something that to somebody else who honestly doesn't even really care. They don't care. And so I think I would challenge people to think about that too. Is your goal really your goal? And if it's not, and if it's a goal that you had when you were 15 and now you're 40, is it still really a goal? And if it isn't, let it go. I give permission all the time. Let it go. If it's no longer in alignment with where you are today, let it go. And let's set fresh new perspectives for you that are in alignment with where you are today. Because our goals change. My goal getting into real estate was different. Nate's goal was different. He wanted to buy a pair of snakeskin boots and a big screen and take his family to Disneyland. Now he owns 3 offices and he's got grandchildren and a legacy to leave behind. So his vision and his goals are completely different today. And we were speaking just before I got on here, and he goes, I still pinch myself that this is my life, growing up with both of us coming from very humble beginnings, now, living where he lives and the things he gets to do and his grandchildren. And, that's, those goals change, but they got to be in alignment with who you are right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that so much. So we talked about clarity. We talked about aligning with your values, aligning with goals. What are some other great tips that you think real estate professionals or just any professional, high achievers, could, most of the people that listen to the show are really high achieving people. What is something else that you can give to people that to help them on this path, on this journey?
Obviously, there's a lot of tips in suggestions in the book if you are in the real estate profession or in any sales profession. I mean, from having consistent marketing to tracking your business and making sure you're, not doing something that isn't generating the right ROI. But what I would say is have a mentor. Top producers, if you look at some of the top producers, they invest 10% of what they make back into themselves. So if you make $1 million, you should be spending 100,000 on yourself, going to different things and investing in yourself. They read books. They attend, I think it's 6 to 8 live events a year where they go and have personal development. You got to get in community. They say that you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And so if you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are naysayers and tire kickers and feeling, humdrum, then you got to elevate your game. Go surround yourself with people who are going to challenge you to be the best version of yourself and challenge you again. Find that tiny little vision that you have inside that you're afraid to share, and they help extract that, right? Mentorship and masterminding's been around since Napoleon Hill, right? It's been around for a long time. And if you look at some of our very most important people that created the Ford vehicle, created the tire, right? Like created some of these guys who are like really, really instrumental in creating the industry that we have today that we all enjoy. They challenged each other. I mean, you look at Henry Ford, like they told him the V8 could not be done. And what did he say? Yes, it can. Go try again. Go try again. Go try again. Right. And so masterminding and surrounding yourself with people that are going to demand that you live up to your potential. I'm in a mastermind at our office, and I'm there not as the coach, not as the trainer. I'm there as their peer, and they call me out, and I love it because they see my potential, and we challenge each other all the time. Like, come on, guys, you could do more than that, and you got to take it serious. It's not just the nod across the room, like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. No, when we show up, and we have excuses. They challenge us on that, and that's where that accountability means you care. So I would suggest you got to surround yourself with people who see your potential, who care about you and want to see you live up to that potential, and are not going to let you have excuses. So whether that's events, get into community with your tribe. If it's reading books, listening to podcasts, and then mentorships or masterminding. I guess we're calling it collaboration these days. That's the new word for masterminding. But
Yeah,
I think it's important to be around people that you can trust, that you can be vulnerable with, and that can help you, because when you're in the weeds, you can't see, and then when someone else comes along and has that helicopter view, then they can look at it and go, okay, you need to go, maybe you could try this. Right. And so it's important to have that safe space where you can be vulnerable and then have your people pick you up and help you.
absolutely. It's so resonating what you said there because I have a saying We can't see the holes in our own ship.
Right.
Nobody. And we all have holes, and there's nothing wrong with the holes. But the fact that if we lean on our own understanding, we're never going to be able to keep sailing. That is just the truth, right? So, this is why mentorship is so important. This is why coaching is so important. I'm a firm believer in reinvesting in yourself, regardless of what your profession is. The best people who are at the top of their game in whatever capacity it is, whether it's a professional athlete or a singer or a real estate agent or a top performer at a corporation or a, you know, high performing visionary entrepreneur. If you don't have that person that can identify those blind spots for you, you're going to continue on that path, which is a narrow path.
Hmm.
It's not the expansive path. And I like the analogy too. I say without a coach or mentor, you're like a mouse in the field. You can only see the direct path right in front of you. Whereas if you have a coach or a mentor, you use the kind of helicopter airplane kind of
Yep.
analogy, right?
Well,
I think of it as a hawk.
yep.
The hawk can see the entire field. The hawk can see a mouse from about a mile away.
Yeah.
Right, and they see all of these things at play at the same time, whereas if you don't have that, you're the mouse in the field that can see just directly in front of you, and ultimately, that's again when we miss those opportunities that are flying past us all of the time. It's so important.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been coming across my radar a lot lately about getting into community and surrounding yourself with people that, because in my industry, it's real easy, especially, the market is a little different right now. We're shifting back into a more balanced buyer's market. And we have agents in our office that have never experienced that, so it's important that you don't get into that water cooler talk of like, that won't work my market, or that won't work for me, or that won't work because, right. And so one of our very favorite mentors early on, his name was Howard Brinton. He said a saying that was, get out of judgment and get into curiosity.
I love that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so if we live in a world where no mind is truly open, right? Think about that. No one's mind is truly open. We already have preconceived prejudice or blocks or, judgments, right? And so when I find myself feeling challenged, or, when in science you had that project where you take the magnets, and if you try to push the north and the north, it never go together, right? But if you turn it, and then it snaps together. So when I find myself in that, I hear Howard Brinton say, get out of judgment and get into curiosity.
Mm.
And so when we think about that, right, like that's so powerful in anywhere, any part of life, whether that's whatever conversations you're having with people. If we get out of, tell me more about that. How does that make you feel? How did you get to that place? What made that true for you? That's one of my favorite questions to ask in coaching, is what made that true for you? Because
Mm.
oftentimes they stop and go, well, I don't know. Right. So when you can stop and just ask yourself, get out of judgment and get into curiosity.
Ooh. So powerful, so timely. I think everyone needs to hear these messages. Again, what regardless of what career you're in, regardless of what industry you're in, this is what it takes to get to that next level of success, right? And what you're saying is so right on. And how many times do we judge others? And I have found that to be the exact formula for success is instead of reaching out in judgment, you reach out with curiosity.
Yeah.
And when you ask questions instead of assuming, not only do you grow, but that other person grows as well. And then all of a sudden, somebody you once looked at potentially as competition ends up being a supporter, a collaborator, a team member. We never know where it could take us, right?
Yeah.
Um, so powerful. I love that. Sarah, any final last words of wisdom for people?
Well, one of my favorite quotes, I actually got it from one of my favorite authors in a book, but I put it in the chapter that we talk about money, because having a budget is part of the steps that we talk about too. And budget like makes people kind of cringy. But you have to have what I call a spending plan, because you have to have a way to spend the money in order to earn the money. And one of my favorite quotes in here, because I think there's such a limitation in how much money people think that they can really make, especially if you're working in a job where you're dependent on, pay raises or whatever. And even being self-employed, there's this limitation in what people think they can earn, and their value, what they bring to the table. So I would finish with this quote is, I worked for menial hire only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have paid.
Ooh, it's all about shattering those expectations of what we set ourselves,
Yep. Yeah.
right?
Yep. So
And
it's
that's
going back to that Roger Bannister moment and cross through it and double it. And how many people have totally crushed the Roger Bannister moment, right? And so I think, if you have goals, like double cross through it and double it. Go for it. Live life large and in charge and on your own terms.
I love that. Wow. Sarah, where can people find more about you and learn more about your book and your work?
So we have a website, 8 Ways to Dominate Any Real Estate Market. You can find out about that. We actually have some companion books that go with. We've got a journal and a business planning book that go with the concepts that we teach in there. And of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and Nate's on YouTube. You can just Google us. You can find us. So we're like I said, Remax professionals, and our offices are in Glendale, Arizona.
I love that. Sarah, thank you so much for being a guest today. And thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of Grasp Confidence Podcast. Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review and share this episode with your audiences. We grow because of you. So keep the sharing going, keep the reviews coming. I read each and every one personally and love them all. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys on the next episode.